This episode of Warp 5 is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek FM at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the non-profit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join in on the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode or any other, please join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, that's B-A-B-E-L, into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
Hi, this is Tucker Smallwood from Star Trek Enterprise. You're listening to Trek FM.
How we doing, Trip? Ready when you are. Prepare for warp.
Course laid in, sir. Request permission to get underway. Let's go.
Welcome, Boomers, to another episode of Warp 5, Trek FM's dedicated Enterprise podcast. Joining me today, as always, is Brandi Jackola. How are you, Brandi?
Well, I'm fine, Patrick. Do people know who you are? Because you didn't introduce yourself, darling.
I don't know. I think people know by now.
I think they know who I am by now.
And I just thought of that, too. And I was going to say, and I'm Patrick right after this.
Yeah, you're Patrick. I did it for you. I did it for you to Pat. It's all good.
Yes. So, and I am your host, with obviously with my co-host that I just said, to Pat. So, you know.
That's how we like it.
If you've been listening for a while, you get the joke. If you haven't, sorry.
Go back.
Okay. So we have a few comments on Babel, if you'd like to read them for us.
I would love to. These are comments mostly from our last episode, but there is one from an older episode as well. So, Patrick Carlin. Hi, Patrick. He says, love hearing how remastered TOS came about, and that he specifically mentioned the Doomsday Machine. That's always been a favorite of mine. First VHS I bought for myself, and I remember when I heard about the remastering, I immediately thought, I can't wait to see what they do with the Doomsday Machine. Of course, now I can't find any corroboration, but a few years ago, I heard that Dave Rossi had a voice cameo in Voyager's Future's End Part 1, in the scene where Henry Starling gets the phone call from Rain Robinson as the voice of his assistant Dave that we hear over an intercom. What am I doing, Dave? You're in a meeting, sir. And I know I'm not supposed to interrupt, but there's a woman on line 3 from Griffith Observatory, a Rain Robinson. She says it's urgent. That's adorable. If I had known that, I would have asked him about it.
Yeah, he goes on in the comment thread. It came up late, so it wasn't in the notes. But he does go on to actually confirm that did happen exactly that way. So
fantastic. I love it. And then we have a lovely comment from Justin Ozer as well. Hi, Justin. Saying, great interview. I enjoyed hearing all the details about TOS Remastered and all of his other Trek work. Now that we know Dave Rossi loves the alternative factor, I want to hear Brandon-Shea and Dave do a commentary of that episode. I don't think they'd lack for conversation if they did that. And then we also have a comment that came up on one of our older episodes, which is Warp 5 number 125. Snow Vulcans are so fun. That was season 1, Essential Enterprise, and this is from Joseph Compton IV, or is it the sequel? Are you the fourth movie in a running series? No, I'm just kidding, Joseph. He says this. Been catching up on Warp 5 and listening to this episode made me realize that every episode from all 4 seasons that has Shran in it is necessary to watch. Starting in the Andorian incident, Shran sees in Archer someone who doesn't like the Vulcans, and Archer seems to take Shran's side in the events. This has the result of Shran seeming to trust Archer a little. As the seasons progress and Archer and Shran work together, Shran sees Archer's attitude towards the Vulcan changing, And by the end of the series, Shran's attitude is less combative towards the Vulcans, primarily because of Archer. This is a major character development for a side character, but it is also a lens for the entire Andorian people. Well said. Well said. And I agree, because I think the interaction between Archer and Shran made them both better people.
Yeah, they were both, any episode they were both in is obviously important because of the way each one of those moved along both characters. It wasn't just one way or the other. They both moved forward or changed in some way because of those episodes.
Yeah, there is definitely not stagnation there, which is why I treasure each and every Shran episode. Even I treasure his part in These Are the Voyages, even though I don't treasure that episode itself. But
yes.
I'm always
don't give away any secrets on that.
Oh, sorry.
We're going to talk about that later.
Okay, sorry.
We don't talk much anyway. Someone else does. But it'll be brought up.
Okay. Just be down here. Thanks.
Very Eeyore-ish. Oh, there I go back to Disney.
Oh, hey, I'm good at Eeyore. Actually, I'm not that much of a downer, usually. So we also have some iTunes reviews, don't we, Patrick?
Yes, we do. We have 3 iTunes reviews since we last did this. Unfortunately, we did get a second 1-star, but we got 2 5-stars. So
What?
that averages out, now with the 4 we've gotten to 2.5. So I'll take it. So Dave Kill gives us our 1-star. It's Warp 5 was at the top of my list, but this new Morning Zoo crew is Warp 1 at best. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry you feel that way. This is the show. This is how we're going to continue to do it. This is the 3 hosts. We'll be here for at least a little while longer, and we hope you give it another listen and maybe you hear something else that you'd like. If not, I'm sorry. Then we also got from Inside Outcast. Warp 5 presents various points of view regarding Star Trek Enterprise. You get matter-of-fact opinions, you get well-reasoned criticism, you get insightful comparisons, plus special guests and interviews. All this in one show. Also, Porthos. So, yes, Porthos.
Yay, Porthos!
And they like us, so cool. And then our last review was by Melvin Goober, and it's also a 5-star review, and it's long, so bear with me. I've never considered myself a Trekkie, but I do have fond memories of the show from back when I was a child. Unfortunately, I'm not as free in time nowadays, so rewatching the series and taking longer than I thought it would. Oh, wow. It's taking longer than I thought it would. As such, my attempts to re-immerse myself in the universe have been slow goings, until I heard about Warp 5. This provides me with an avenue to catch up on Star Trek knowledge and nostalgia in a very entertaining and enlightening manner. The depth of Trek knowledge as well as the breadth of general knowledge allow for scintillating listening, both in terms of humor and inspiration. All of the hosts are a delight to listen to, but Brandi is definitely my favorite. She has an incredible way of being funny, knowledgeable, and relatable all at once, while doing a great job of sharing the spotlight. So, kudos, Brandi.
Melvin Goober, whoever and wherever you are, you have no idea how much I needed to hear that. I had a really rough week, and when I saw this, you just made me light up like a bright star. Thank you so much. Because sometimes life is hard, and then you have that one little thing happen that just makes it all disappear, and you go, oh, okay, I'm all right. And you did that for me, buddy. You did that for me. Thank you. No, I'm not crying. Shut up, you're crying.
And it's okay if you are. But, so, we do have a special guest today, and we do have, because in case anyone hasn't noticed, we've been missing Brandon.
I don't think anyone
I promise you, he's coming. What he's been doing is he went to go get our special guest. They're on a shuttle pod. They're on their way back now. So I guess now would be a good time to introduce them. It is Brandon and Larry Nemecek.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you for such a wonderful introduction, Brandi and Patrick. I appreciate it. We're jumping right into the interview here today because my wife is sick upstairs. So you may hear a little bit of kids crying and screaming in the background. As long as there's no broken bones, though, I'm not going to stop recording the podcast tonight because we have a very special guest joining us. And it is Dr. Trek himself, Larry Nemecek. How are you doing, my friend? Thank you so much for joining us.
I am doing much better now than I was a week ago or 5 days ago. So you can actually understand me, which is a good thing.
Excellent. Too much of the Romulan ale.
I wish it was Romulan ale, more like some Romulan allergy that broke out. We had like a 2-day spike here when it got to 95 and 85 2 days in a row, and then it went back down to being 65. But that always like unleashes something. There's one plant somewhere, and I can always tell it goes because my allergies. I never have any allergies except for this one plant in this one part of California, and it just goes. It never affected me back in Oklahoma.
And it's the this side of paradise plant.
It's a Retlaw plant or something. Yeah, I wish if it was if it was a Omicron Ceti spore plant, Omicron Ceti 3. Come on, give me a cred there. But then when you watch it 20 years in a row, you can do that. If I was that, I'd make something on it, or we'd license it, or we'd do shows or something. Come see the pod show. Okay,
the real ones.
They have the California Golden Poppies. We could have
Excellent, right on. Well, today, because we're just starting off with our Season 4 retrospective of Enterprise, I wanted to get a little bit more information from behind the scenes on Season 4 and the making of Season 4. And we had Dave Rossi last week. I was saying his name wrong. I couldn't believe it until editing. It's Rossi, not Rossi. I am Canadian, I know. But
are you sorry about it?
I was sorry. I was sorry.
If you called him Rosie the whole time, just be glad you were in Canada.
So today we're asking Larry all about Season 4 of Enterprise and a little bit of the behind the scenes on the production of the last season of Star Trek before we got into the fallow years, as Larry likes to call it. So we're going to hand the mic over to Brandi, who's going to ask our first question before we jump into Season 4. Brandi, take it away.
Well, thank you. So, Larry, what was your first impression of Enterprise and the direction that the producers wanted to take this franchise?
Oh, well, so Enterprise to me was kind of like the best of times, the worst of times, because it was like after all the years I'd been in LA after doing the Next Gen book, but coming into it late and meeting lots of people, but not being there at the roots of it, and then DS9 being a couple years down. The actor casts came in the actor cast as opposed to crew casts. The actors and the cast, what was that show? Voyager and Enterprise casts I kind of knew from day one, but since so much of the crew people, were around, the writers kind of came and went a little bit, but so much of the crew people just stayed. Everything, the familiarity and the trust, even with me doing the magazine and fact files, and then when StarTrek.com started and was all lot-based, Enterprise was kind of the climax of that, as far as people being familiar with me, and even like the guards that I knew, but it was like, can't let you on, Larry, or whatever, without being something formal. Everything was at the most relaxed stage, and part of that was also because digital cameras had come in first, like everybody had their little Canon Elfs, before they were on phones. And it was like, well, they weren't on phones until after Enterprise was gone. It was like social media. But even having little digital Canon Elfs and everything, they quit using Polaroids for, the makeup and costume approval pictures. And when digital cameras found a niche backstage, then, oh my God, everybody had their digital cameras, and the crew started doing backstage pictures. And it just was a different vibe, which is why, to me, it's such a crime that Enterprise only went 4 years. Because if it'd gone 7 years, it would have been the most, whether people cared or not, it would have been the most well-documented behind-the-scenes show of all of them. Because you weren't depending on Robbie Robertson or somebody's, 35 millimeter, or, official studio pictures, or people's lousy Polaroids. Because whoever had the official Polaroid camera would take a few others. Or people would, run off stage and not get yelled at and take some... they would always actors would always find some way to get themselves in there, the guest actors or the extras. And that's been like most of the behind the scenes pictures up until then, and Enterprise is the one where it busted out. But otherwise, the beginning of Enterprise and me working on 3 or 4 overlapping projects and being on the lot 3 times a week. And, that's why I was really, I don't want to say sad. I was selfishly sad on top of everything else when it didn't go. But I was really looking forward to that. The other end of that, though, was the tragedy of the Ron Moore saga, where, TNG ending and going into DS9 and Voyager, all the writers found a home if they wanted one on one of the other shows. And it was like the other end of the telescope this time. It was like one show ending up going into one. And as DS9 ended, it was a couple of years before Voyager went away, but Ron kind of had the idea he would go work with Brandon, like they'd worked on Next Gen together when they were babies, and then they did the 2 movie scripts together. And when it kind of became clear, however it came down, I wasn't in the room, but basically when Brandon and Rick were going to create what became Enterprise, and Ron thought he was going to be in the middle of that, and then when it became apparent he wasn't, like, do a couple of the last years of Voyager and then we'll see you later, but you're not in the secret, lunch meetings to develop the new show, he very gracefully and gentlemanly just, there was no point in hanging around Voyager. He saw the writing on the wall and he went off and carved his own niche. Went to Roswell and then, Carnival, I think, and then Battlestar after that. Maybe another one in there somewhere. And then, and then onward from there. And that was sad. And the other weird thing was about the beginning of Voyager, Enterprise, which, me, I'm the weird fan. I've always been the weird fan. I try to think about all of fandom and all the fans' niches, but since I first came to LA and saw with my own eyes what was going on and what the real vibe was like, and heard all the boys on Next Gen talk about how hard it was to write Star Trek and how many perfectly good Emmy-winning writers got chewed up and spit out by the process with Gene's rules and the Gene sandbox thing, and how they were basically, good humans and good Federation people, and conflict from without, and all of that stuff. And you had to kind of know the canon, and if you didn't, we would fix it, so don't scream when we fix your canon problems. And all that stuff. And my whole thing was, I said, well, and me being the background fan, who, apparently no one else cared. Everybody else were character people. Now we call them shippers. But back then it was like, are you a character guy or are you a background guy? And, most women were character people. But anyway, I'd always wanted a historical show. I'd always wanted to go back to, my thing was I always wanted to see a founding of the Federation Romulan War show. But I knew they would never do it because they were spending the money on 24th Century. And they're not going to go suddenly redo the designs, and get out of, the ship pieces that they have in warehouses they can pull from to make stuff cheaper. It's like, that's so amortized, they're never going to pull up and do a whole series where they throw all that out the window, the props, the costumes, the set pieces. So when I heard the rumor that they were going to do a prequel show, but they were going to do an Enterprise, a pre-Federation show that led into the founding of the Federation, I wet my pants. I was like, oh my God, this is so brave. This is so, I know part of it was paranoia about finding something new, because they always are terrified they've got to do exactly the same thing again, only totally different. That's the challenge of every Star Trek series and movie. And I was like, oh my God, they're going to got the balls to, either the desperation or the balls to do this. And they even tested the idea with people somewhere. And then there was some, I saw they had fake things. One of them was a Black Ops. What should the next Star Trek show be? I remember seeing this questionnaire. They went to some movie theater and did it at a sci-fi show, a Black Ops Star Trek, a Star Trek Rescue, Rescue 911 for Starfleet, founding of the Federation show. Now you laugh. That was all before JJ and then Discovery.
They totally
so
could have
laugh.
had Shatner on for that too.
Yeah. He would have claimed his half percentage and say, "Shut up, Leonard, you'll get your half." But Equal Nations Clause wins again. But I could not believe it. And then when that all leaked, and then once again, I saw fandom go, "Oh no, not a prequel show. Star Trek's about going." I was like, it was like 1987 again. I was like, "Shut up! Are you kidding me? Shut up!" And of course, that was the big ding against it. Now there were a lot of problems with Enterprise, but to me, the format was the people executing the format. But then when I thought it was Rick, Brandon, and Ron, Rick and Brandon, whose hearts, God bless them, they were never original series guys, no matter how much they tried to retcon themselves, and Brandon did give it a go. But I was like, oh my God, this will be horrible. And then when Ron was in it, I went, okay, fine. Ron will fulfill that extra piece, that extra missing niche. And then a month later, Ron was gone. I'm like, oh my God, this thing's in trouble. And my whole reaction to the pilot was, okay, That wasn't near as bad as I thought it was going to be. Kronos in 4 days pissed me off, but other than that, this wasn't quite as bad as I thought it was going to be. So that was my mishmash of thoughts and feelings and memories and emotions.
Well, slight tangent. If Cronus in 4 days upset you, then how did the transwarp beaming in Into Darkness feel? Moving on.
I'm sorry. In what? Yeah. Every JJ movie we're all sitting there going like, okay, what am I going to say about this? What am I going to say about this? What am I going to say about this?
What were your primary duties on Enterprise? Did they change throughout the seasons? Like, what did you do on set? Were you simply an archivist, or what were you doing?
No, I wasn't. No. I never had the closest I came to having a production payroll job was the times when Ira and Jerry would have me do like a memo, like when Andre would do a science memo, or when when Joan Pierce, the successor to Kellum DeForest, would do a memo, that kind of thing. And that was only 4 or 5 times. Now there was some unofficial times, like when I saved him a lot of grief on Birthright on DS9, and I pointed out that Klingons don't take prisoners, and that was not some anal fan fact they could just blow off. That was. And then when I found out that Ron didn't know what they were doing, anyway, that's a whole fun side story. But aside from little things like that, I never had I had an official affiliate. We edited the official magazine, and then when StarTrek.com got going, that was there, and then I was in the archives and licensing twice a week because the fact files need for reference was so deep that there was nobody. They didn't have enough staff in licensing to fulfill it, so fact files paid for me twice a week to go up and pull things from archives and get notes and chase down, because they got promised so much more photo coverage than there was. The best photography reference was with the set dressers and the visual effects guys and the prop. It wasn't sitting in a production office somewhere. So, and the blueprints were all in the art department and that kind of thing. So part of what I did was increasingly like chase that down. We need this wacko, all the set pictures from this set you saw for 5 minutes on this one episode of Voyager on some culture we could care less about after this episode. But they are scraping the barrel for stuff because they had 700 issues to do. So I would go over to Jim Meese and I'd get like 8 or 10 of those in a row, and we'd sit down and his assistant would sit down with me and we'd pull photos out. So that was, I never had a lot of the people that worked on the shows never got a credit. So, never got a screen credit. That was before. Now you watch like Discovery and any other show, they have, the caterer's second assistant's left toenails, veterinarian's dog's walker is in there. Janet, my wife Janet, the only time she ever got a credit was on First Contact because it was a movie and she got a credit as assistant script coordinator. But she was there 5 years, never got. If she'd been there to the finale, they gave you like Christmas gift, on the finales. Everybody got a lot. The extras got lines, and all the office people got a credit. But that was that. More than you wanted to know.
So since we are focusing kind of on,
we got to get to
4,
the season. Yeah.
What did you think of the way they did season 4 with the 3-story arcs?
Well, it was brilliant. It took somebody like Manny coming in, who was accredited, writer, but who was an original series fan at heart, just like many of the. Here's the thing, Manny is so revered for what he did with the 4th season. The truth is, and I've said this for years, there were lots of people who were on staff who could have. I don't want to say exactly what Manny did because everybody has their own talents and abilities, but it was not for lack of trying. There had been years and years and years of people back to TNG. But as it went along, and especially with Enterprise, since that was the whole point of the show, what all the audience thought it was going to be, oh, look, we're going to lead into Kirk's time. And when it kind of like was this, okay, sometime we're going to lead into Kirk's time, that feel, that vibe, that direction never felt like it was there. And it wasn't for lack of trying. And I said a couple of times that, again, bless their hearts, Rick and Brandon. Rick was doing things like keeping boy bands out of the mess hall.
We
UPN,
know.
stupid UPN.
We just learned
right?
that.
That's come to light. And I think Rick's gotten a lot of, it's very easy to say this thing that he took over, really, the first couple of years Gene's health was so down. And when Maury Hurley and Bob Justman and all those early people kind of cleared the field and he kind of took power, basically, it was a really good thing, even though he banged heads with Michael, and as the boys got older, like with Rick and Ira, he banged heads about, sometimes they'd say he'd interpret Gene too strictly and wouldn't let the franchise breathe and grow a little bit. But it was better that than the other thing with everything kind of, getting wobbly really fast and nobody sitting there saying no. And it gradually changed. Now, maybe he should have eased up a little bit. Maybe he should have stepped back and hired people to do that too, and then him be a check. But the bottom line was, there were lots of people on staff who were begging, who were chomping at the bit to do things. And it was even in, especially on Enterprise, the people that wound up being there. I mean, Chris Black and people that didn't say the whole time, and David Goodman, and Mike Sussman, who was there, who finally got to do some of the things he wanted to do in fourth season. But like, he wanted to have Orions at the beginning of, this is, I don't know if he's told you all this, or you've read this somewhere or whatever, but one of the ones that sticks out in my mind is the early, and I'm trying to remember the name of it, the early third season show, they're in the Expanse, and it's the airlock show.
Oh, yes.
Well, that's a whole side story
episode.
too sometime. Yeah, I think I've told somebody that story before.
Anomaly, yeah.
But it's the one where the Raiders are taking stuff, and Archer has his revenge a little bit, and they're the Osarians. Okay, so
right, yeah.
As that story developed, Mike wanted to make them Orions and have them be Orion pirates. Orions, 200 years earlier than the Orion Syndicate on DS9, but 100 years before Kirk, have us see some early day Orion pirates. They went right to their natural thing. And I remember Mike saying he kept floating the idea. He was always bugging Brandon with stuff. And Brandon was like, because maybe he thought Rick would shoot it down. And I remember him telling me this. He said, "Come on, Brandon, look, Orions, it would be great." And I remember Brandon saying, "Solid green skin, And they barely tried the Andorians, so they didn't want to do like solid green Orions. Anyway, so instead of the Orions, they became the Osarians, which Mike always said they sounded like Irish dinosaurs. But that's an example. Now, by the end of the season, when things were getting really dicey, the second season, or end of second season, but before the Zenda year, the is it Bounty? The one with the first time you have Tellarites.
Bounty.
Yeah, Bounty. Oh, right. The penultimate before the Expanse. So that character was just going to be a random new alien, forehead alien. And before this is chronologically before he tried the Orions in the Expanse. But Mike once again tried to make that a Tellarite. And this time, and of course he had a brother, so they would both be Tellarites. Well, it was like an 11th hour thing, and he got it approved. Brandon and Rick said okay. Because I think by then they were like desperate for not desperate, but they were trying to do anything to get some interest, and the ratings were not doing well, and they were on the bubble, about to be canceled at the end of the second year. And because it had all gone over to Les Moonves, and Les Moonves didn't care that you were the golden calf that launched the network or whatever. Now you just got to get by on your numbers like everybody else in America on TV does. Nothing special about you guys. Make money or you're out of here. And he got Tellarites put in, but it was after they'd been cast, after all the sets had been done. Mike Westmore had done a Tellarite once before for a video game. So he had the full-blown snout and everything. Well, Rick knocked down the nose to where it wasn't as snouty, in the approvals. He put a lot of texture in the makeup, which was cool, but the Tellarite kind of got knocked down a little bit. But he was going to have it be a cloven hoofed. He had cloven hooves going. I've got pictures somewhere of him sculpting the clay. Again, this was Enterprise getting loose and loose and loose, and I was getting more chance to do that kind of thing. And he had a dew claw. Well, no, I take it back. So at the last minute, because they'd already got this guy in a ship with like tiny buttons, they thought the cloven hooves looked stupid. So they went ahead and made him be digitals. So there was like, Tellarite moment. So, but they were in there, and everybody's like, oh, then the actors they cast are all just skinny, standard-looking guys. So the fact that they're Tellarite, and they don't have them, they're not arguing. Right. Debate, Tellarite-wise, wasn't part of the script. So it was really just a throw-in at the last-minute thing. It was like a wasted thing, like the kind of thing you hate to see when they're doing. And it was just all the worst case of that. I know we got to get to season 4 here sometime, but Mike, when they lost the cloven hooves, Mike made a dew claw and put it, you can barely see it, but it's on the backs of their hands. So it was kind of like, let's do something that's kind of a throwback to, the pig-like Tellurite. So that kind of stuff would happen. So season 3 ends, and they're going to get canceled. The Zinda year is a big step forward and, grinds things up, and you don't have thin shows like you got in second season. Oh my God, the Marauders. I just was like, and it's Klingons going to scare this colony, and is anything else going on? Nope.
Seven Samurai. That episode's Seven Samurai.
Of course it is. And not much else. Let's watch them put weapons in the village, and then the Klingons come back, and then they scare them off. No bloody B, no bloody C story in that. Okay. They used to make fun of Michael Piller and his B stories and his C stories, but it at least rounded out the shows. Anyway, so the whole 4th season was a gift. The Paramount TV studio jumped in with the show and said, we will, yes, cut the budgets. We will go all digital. And Sony paid for the cameras as a demo. That's why there's a Sony credit in 4th season. They had a little PR thing at the beginning of the year. So there was no more videotape, no more, the video village on stage was now it was so weird, 2004. And there weren't like VHS tapes for dailies. People just got emailed, video files. It was a whole new brave new world the last year.
Well, you could definitely tell. I mean, when we were covering the 4th season episode, like the season 4 looks so damn good,
Well, and they'd had this weird mystery the first year of why the damn shows are so dark. And there was this like Thomas Nast circular pointing firing squad. Nobody could figure out why the shows they would see when they filmed them on stage and they saw the dailies, why when they're broadcast they look so horrible. And UPN blamed the distribution system, and the distribution system blamed the lab, and the lab blamed the stage, and stage, the crew, and the crew blamed UPN. I mean, everybody blamed everybody else, and Bob Blackman was even like making the uniforms lighter blue than they originally had them. I mean, it was just, they were talking about repainting the sets lighter because no one could figure out why. And then, the digital helped some of that. By then that wasn't the point anymore. But anyway, so they cut the budget, and then the studio put in more money because they wanted the old 100 shows. The original series only had 79, 80 hours, but they still sold. And they just wanted to have 100 episodes. So the 4th season was a total gift, which is why to me it was so heartbreaking, because they're right. All the fans said the 4th season was the best one. Why did it not get renewed? And after those first couple of trilogies, when the Augment trilogy went down, and it didn't go through the roof, it was like, And that's on your list of things to get to, so I'll shut up and quit filling in so much.
Well, speaking of season 4 and those story arcs, which one is your favorite 3-episode arc?
Or 2, because there's some good
or 2. Or 2.
Well, now that one's, they were all have you all heard about Manny and the card file? So Manny gets the reins at the beginning. They stick him with the space Nazis, right?
Yes.
Okay. Rick originally... See, now, here's the thing. So Manny had been there since 3rd season. Similitude, awesome show, has nothing to do with the original series. Manny... Here's my original thing. So I'd known Chris Black and Mike Sussman, and Juan Fernandez was the script coordinator, and I'd gotten to know those guys over the time. Had just gotten to know David Goodman, because he wrote the parody on Futurama, so he was the comedy guy that Brandon brought in, and they were all really, and a couple of people that were even there just 1 year and left. But Manny was this mysterious guy that came in, and I would go into the Hart Building to say hi, and he was always, and I'd say I'd like to, and his assistant was Donna Rooney. And I'd say, I'd like to just say hi to Manny sometime. And she's like, he's always in his office. He's always working. And after a while, I realized it wasn't me. He was just, I thought he's either totally antisocial in a complete, like, Asperger's case. And I'm not, or something's going on. Or he's paranoid that he's not going to last or something. And then when his shows start to air and there are these awesome scripts, I'm like, wow. And so finally, by the end of the year, he just pulled a Gene Coon. He literally went in his office and just writing machined these scripts out. And there's some of the best stuff anybody's done. And so by the end of the year, when UPN, Les Moonves takes over UPN and goes, okay, we'll let the studio buy a 4th season. You guys step back and don't show run the show, basically. Find another showrunner. Well, the guy with the hottest hand had been Manny, which didn't go down really well with, and I can't blame him. So some of them didn't want to stay around with that. It wasn't anything about Manny. They just thought they'd been there longer, and if somebody else was going to run the show, that they deserved it, and they didn't. And that's why you had so many of the mid-range writers left the show that year. And not that they weren't asked back, they just, so Manny started the year with like Mike and Phyllis, the junior writers, and Andre Bermanis had gone from science advisor to staffer. And they started off hiring a couple other, Lezebnik, and who had worked a little bit on Next Generation, but they didn't last the whole season. So, but it was totally, they handed the keys to Manny. It was his to do with. So Manny says, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to fix the Vulcans. We're going to do something about Klingons and the Flatheads, and I have this list of 20 cool things. And now you've heard the story about his index cards on the board, right?
Well, we've heard Chris refer to it as his magic bag of hindsight. Is that the same
thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I didn't see it at the beginning of the year. I didn't see, because it was like toward the end of the years when I first started sticking my nose in. Because I knew not to talk to anybody. Like right now on Discovery, don't try to talk to anybody early because they're all in their panic mode and they're early hardcore. But I do have a picture, and I dug it out. I've got one at the very end, but I've got I found my picture of him. Where is it? With 6 cards on the board. They were like Klingon foreheads, Sky City episode, Starbase 1. I mean, a Colonel Green. And that was just what was left. An Andorian arc, and that's what what Babel turned into. Yeah, the Babel arc turned into. But one of them was fix the Vulcans, and that's what the Forge turned out to be. Like, explain why the Vulcans have been, like SOBs, because they've been affected by Romulans. And so, yeah, he had some, and the Augments started off as the Colonel Green arc, but then it transmogrified into, what it became. And when they got a chance to do Brent, when Brent said, I would love to play, I don't want to be Lore and Data, because that wouldn't make sense, but do one of Soong's forebears, how about it? And so a lot of things were organic, but it was Manny's idea to say, guys, if we did like the 2-parters always go so well, and they use them for sweeps months and ratings. What if we did a trilogy and we spread that? They were totally about amortizing money out. Mm-hmm. So it was cheaper to even hire a big guest star for 3 shows than for 2 or 1. I mean, like over time, you got more bang. Right. So everything, whether it was sets or human flesh or whatever it was, special effects, you got more bang for your buck with a trilogy. And yeah, after they did it, it was kind of like, why haven't we been doing this for 15 years? But,
So what's your favorite arc?
It's one of those things.
What's your favorite?
I'm just gonna. Well, what do you think?
It's probably got to be the Babel arc.
It's the Babel arc, yeah. Because and what's funny is, I'm hopscotching all over the place. I know. So Borderland was going to be exciting because they were going to do the male Orions, and they got all into it, and it was going to be cool. And a male, the whole thing of the Orion slave girl again, and she's up there running. She was going to be the slave girl, but they had the big, biker guys, the wrestler types, and they get Big Show, the wrestler. And it's a stunt thing, it's going to be stunt casting. It's going to be awesome, and this will get we got Britt Spiner, and we got Big Show from Wrestling Crossover, UPN, and it was cool. And the show they did, I think it was Borderland, when they went to the auction house, and they had all the Vince Dedrick, the stunt coordinator, had his dad as one of the stunt guys. Who his dad was Matthews, who'd been thrown off the sled, the ridge by Ruck. So his dad had been a stunt guy in the original series, a red shirt. Anyway, he finally got him onto Enterprise. They had so much going on, so much cool, and I did a on-set report from that for the magazine, and a lot of fun stuff going on. And I looked over, and they did a Tellarite. And I remember it was Pablo Soriano, who was one of the regular extras, but again, it was just a tall, skinny guy with a Tellarite outfit on. And I was like, oh. And I was like, okay. And in my mind's eye, I knew Manny by now, and I knew Mike, and the rest, and I knew by now it was like Gar and Judy, and like all these huge original series people. And I'm like, I bet they did a Tellarite, no one thought about it, they just did the hit. They just did that because it was a moment. Like Pablo got up, he was in frame and got to go, so it was like an extra's favorite thing. They actually got to scream to themselves, even though they're under makeup. And I remember thinking, I bet they had no idea about the casting on that. And sure enough, when we were talking about the Babel arc later on, we were talking. It turns out that Mike is a big Telluride fan, and which is why he got him into Bounty. And turns out Manny is a huge Telluride fan too. All the underground. It's like this generation's McCoy fans. And Manny said, and I said, so you actually got real Tellurites in this. And before I could prompt him, Manny goes, yes, we'd had Tellurites on the show before, but they weren't real Tellurites. And after I saw the dailies for Borderland, I went, okay, guys, I wrote a memo that said, from now on, we have get all the Ferengi actors. They are now our Tellurites. I mean, literally. And he went on and on about it. Stuff them with the pill if you have to. And we're going to, give them the attitude. And I don't care if they are just extras in the background scene. We want noses up. And I'm just sitting there going, yes, yes, yes. So, like the show was done by then. But I was like, my judgment of humanity was right on. So in this one little niche of the whole season, of the whole series, it's like we reached, brother. But really, it was that way on so much other. I mean, like people watch the show, that last series, the last season, and they know that they were in there plugging away, because it's one. And there's a way to do stuff where it doesn't cost money. It's not overtime. You write a memo up front, or you see something in dailies, and you go, can we just adjust this tomorrow, or something, whether it's a prop or it's a costume piece or it's a makeup. And that's, they go on and on about fan service and anal fandom and blah, 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 like with Discovery Now. But it really, if the right person is in the right job, much less if the right person has the keys, you can do anything on a day's notice for no money and fix it and make 5 million fans wet their pants. Yeah. It's very easy to do when you've got the right people in the right place. And the whole 4th season is, Rick wanted them to start off, he was like, Manny, it's your show now, but I'm thinking maybe 5-7 episodes with the space Nazis at the beginning. Manny's like, and I remember his words saying this, it's like, they knew they didn't have a full 26, they only had 22. And they knew that, and he talked Rick out of doing 5 or 7 to just doing a 2-parter. So he's like, okay, I've only got 22 slots. I've already lost 2, getting out of this, stupid space. I've only got 20 slots to play original series fan here. And at the end of the year, he said, yes, for some people who thought we were doing an original series, lead in every single slot. He's like, I only had 20 shows. I knew we were not coming back. Like 99% we were not coming back. So it's like, I had this list of stuff to get done. Who knows when there would be Star Trek on TV again with us, with the keys to the car, with us with the playground and all the fun toys to do with what we wanted to do. So he's like, I'm sorry if having every show be some kind of a lead into the original series was like too much for you, Sweet Tooth indulged. He said, but that's the way. I remember him being totally on about that. He's like, we only had 20 shows. Yes. I had so much to get done, and he didn't get it all done. They didn't do the Stratos City. He wouldn't do a show where they were building Stratos City and whatever that meant for the, the division of, before you saw the races, the culture divulged and all that. That and the building of Starbase One. He had this thing he wanted to do for Starbase One, and I've got a picture of him at the end with those 2 cards on that same board. Okay. So that sets it up. Yeah, but it was the trilogies, all of that, the basic thrusts, that was all. And then Mike jumped in, and then Gar and Judy jumped in. Yeah.
Well, you had mentioned them earlier there. Now, I want to ask about Judith and Garfield Reeves-Stevens. Like, how did they get involved? Because with only 1 or 2 exceptions, novel writers hadn't been involved with any episode writing before. I mean, we had Michael Jan Friedman in an episode from season 1 of Voyager. And while he hadn't written a book at the time, David R. George, and David Mack, they had done a little bit on Deep Space Nine. But Judith and Garfield Reeves-Stevens came on for season 4. How did that happen? Because right now everybody's making a big deal that Kirsten Beyer is on staff for Discovery, right? But we've had this already.
Right. Well, we had that, and then, people overlook it, but Melinda Murdoch was on. Am I on the right person?
Melinda Snodgrass.
Melinda Snodgrass did, was on for a while and had the very highlight of success with Measure the Man, and then got burned so bad on the Irish show that she got burned by Hollywood and left. But yeah, it had been very rare, but there had been book people. But it wasn't. Manny had read Federation and maybe First Contact, but he'd read a couple of their novels, loved what they did, and they were set right in the time that they were doing the show. And of course, he still had dreams of having a 5th and 6th and 7th season and doing the lead into the Romulan War and the founding of the Federation. But he knew that they had that. He didn't care. So yeah, he reached out to them, okay. And they had done some script work. They were book people, but they were really interested in doing more scripting and not just prose work. So it was a win-win for both of them, and they replaced Phil Lazebnik and the other two they'd started off with. They wrote one script, Daedalus. Mm-hmm. Alan Brennert and Ken Lazebnik, although I think one of them used their pen name on it because they were so upset with the redo. It was kind of like Ed. The guy that wrote Chain of Command originally, Frank Badamarco, Emmy-winning writer, came in, was all enthused about this script. It's incredible. Got Patrick excited about it on Next Gen, but just could not get into the Star Trek. Great writer, just could not get into the sandbox. And Alan and Ken were kind of the same way. So they did their 13 weeks. They were out, and when their 13 weeks, which is way earlier than when their shows air. So when their 13-week was up and they had a slot open for a team, especially, it was Manny's idea to reach out to them.
Okay.
You mentioned about the cancellation a little earlier, but when did the cancellation, that Enterprise was being canceled, when did that news come down, and what episode were they filming at the time? Do you know?
Oh, I remember this totally well. It was, and now I was going to look and see which one it was. It was Best of Both Worlds.
Wow, they really knew ahead of time.
Wow,
I know, canceled before it started.
It was a time traveler that broke the temporal, prime directive. No, it was in A Mirror Darkly. Okay. People were the whole year after the Augment trilogy went down, people were looking at the ratings. They went up, but they didn't blow through. They didn't blow out the ceiling. They weren't Quark's shuttle coming back to DS9 to break the time barrier. Sorry to be crossing streams like that. It's like the image. I
thought crossing the streams was bad.
I know, but I do it all the time, and the world is still spinning. I last time I checked, that explains the alternate universe we're in today. Okay, it's all my fault. No. They knew that the ratings hadn't gone crazy, but they were still. Everybody was hoping. Mm-hmm. But part of it was, and part of the thing behind These Are the Voyages, to presage that. Fans look at this, Enterprise fans look at this as, it's the Enterprise series, but to so many people, and there's a great picture that we showed at cons for a long time of when Enterprise was canceled and the show wrapped. Rick got arranged for everybody who had worked on Star Trek since day one of Encounter at Farpoint. What started getting to be called the Berman era, which is kind of interesting, but it's a handy title. But basically the 18-year veterans. And so there's about, and maybe you've seen it too, there's about 20, all different departments. There's one woman who'd been like a little costume lady all 18 years. Her name was Seema something. Everybody from Rick and Peter Larritzen and Dan Curry and Mike Okuda, across the board, all departments, if you'd worked there 18 years, they got them together in a picture on the Enterprise bridge. And so for a lot of people had worked 15 years and 12 years and 10 years, and had at least 2 or 3 of the shows on their belt. There was a lot of split when DS9 and Voyager were going, but, so many people, it wasn't just the end of this show, it was like the end of an era. And people were waking up and going, oh my God, I got so seduced by working here. That's not how Hollywood is. You're always paranoid when this show gets canceled, or even if it's a hit and goes 3 years, keeping yourself fresh. And so many people have been seduced by being in the cocoon of Star Trek that a lot of people just retired when Enterprise went down because they'd been out of circulation for so long. They didn't have a network of people. Some were lucky. So there was so much built up momentum of hope that it would get renewed anyway. And which was, Trek fans were in that, like, we were all like, yay. Not the Enterprise naysayers, they could care less. But so many of the people who still were with Enterprise. And then I was like, how'd they do? And they were up. Everybody, well, how'd the Augment show do? Well, they were up. How'd the Babel episode do? Well, they were up. Or maybe they were filming before Babel aired. I should look at the dates. But I do remember people were sky high, just like with Trials and Tribulations. When they rebuilt the bridge, even with, the tweaks, and it wasn't the Enterprise, it was the Defiant. And when they brought the leg, this is what 18 years can do. They went and got the effing leg that they built for First Contact and put it in. I've got a picture of the stage. The bridge is over here, and then here's the pine trees with the leg over here that they could reshoot the pilot part, right? They just haul it out and touch it up. Hey, that saved money, So let's spend a little bit more on the bridge over there, on the corridor. Oh, Jeffrey's tube. Oh my God, this is so cool. And let's spend more and do a CGI-ish, Gorn and a Tholian and all this, cool stuff. Again, making everybody wet their pants. It was just like Trials and Tribulations. Everybody had to come by and take their pictures in the captain's chair. Everybody had to come over and take Brit pictures. I've got mine. Everybody on .com came over. Everybody and their dog and their uncle and their aunt. And, Bob Justman came by and they said, like, oh, you got the carpet right this time. And, I mean, people, there's a million pictures of people in the captain's chair. And in the middle of all that, and I think it was while they were filming part 2, they got the word. Pull the plug. It would be May. And everybody, the crew was just like, people had just gotten into this, and it had done nothing but got accelerated by all the goodwill and the good vibe, and everybody was just giddy with all the original series stuff, and seeing, everybody running, and it was Mirror, but seeing, everybody running around in their Mirror original series outfits, and the Mirror Enterprise stuff, and it was just like they blew the balloon up. It wasn't like they could have canceled it during Daedalus or something, They had to cancel it. They had to get the word in the middle of the biggest fun time of the whole year. But that was it, and people were like, yeah. And I remember, like, the crew guys were just like, people were like, oh. And I remember talking to somebody, I can't remember, maybe even Billy Peets, who was the chief lighting guy for 15 or something of those years. And I remember somebody, one day we were walking along, somebody came out of their slump, which I didn't blame them for being in, and kind of looked at me and said, like, well, Larry, how about you? Are you going to be okay? I'm like, oh, the magazine, the website, we'll be fine. We'll be, we've got stuff we had from 30 years we haven't talked about yet. We'll be fine. And then, within a few months, the Decipher company had a really bad embezzlement process, and it blew up. And so that was a whole sidebar thing. But I just remember everybody being depressed, and then there was a little bit of lightheartedness the way they did the last shows. Demons in Terra Prime. And one thing I wanted to do that I'd never done, I'd always meant to, I said I would love to be a Tellarite. And now they're doing Tellarites right. I'll wear a pillow. I know I had more weight then, but I'll wear a pillow. I can do this all day. I can walk around with my nose in the air all day.
Come on, Larry. If Tom Hanks can lose a bunch of weight for his Stranded movie, you can put on a bunch of weight if you really want to be a Tellarite.
I don't think I was going to get paid the money that Tom Hanks got paid for. But I would pay for a really expensive pillow myself. I will do that. I'll do that. I'll get a very fine pillow. But I missed out on the Coalition of Planets scene. I was talking to Dave Trotty, who was the first AD, and he's like, "Oh, I don't know if you knew this. Remember when Pink 5 was the hot early days fan film thing in Star Wars fandom?
Yes.
Okay, so here's the total. The Pink 5 girl and one of her co-stars are aliens in the Coalition of Planet thing.
I did not know that.
Yes, they are. I've got a picture somewhere of just them. It's in the. But the digital cameras. There are so many cool joke and behind-the-scenes pictures from especially the last 3 years. What's his name that led the show? Captain Archer.
Scott Bakula.
I want to say Steve. Scott. I can't want to say Steve.
Steve
That's
Bakula.
not right, Larry.
Steve
Bakula, his
Bakman.
twin sister. Yeah. Steve Beckman.
Steve Bakula,
no,
his
Scott
twin
had started
sister.
this.
That's great.
Scott had, for employee morale, had started having an employee of the week. So every week they stopped at lunch and had an employee of the week thing, and somebody in some department, and their department head gave them an award, and they had more parties, and they did gags on people, and when it was like they did this huge thing with Jolene Blaylock had a thing about Mr. Pooh on
Mr. Hanky the Christmas Pooh?
Yeah, Mr. Hanky the
South
Christmas
Park,
Pooh.
yeah.
On South Park. And they had a day where everybody, anyway, they did they did masquerade contests for the crew at Halloween. I mean, they did all this in-house employee stuff, and every week, and there's tons of pictures of that stuff out there. And every year the ADs did a crew disc that had tons. And anyway, it was just such a different, it's really so sad that this was the show. I mean, you had that vibe and everything, but it was like a maturation inside for the in-house crew that just hit this maximum point, and it was just so sad that it all went away. So anyway, I was trying to get to be a Tellurite, and Dave said, we've just filled up all the people to be Tellurites and all the aliens in the last 2 shows. But we're working on something where there's going to be a scene in the finale. You wouldn't be a Tellurite, but maybe we could get you into that. I said, I bet I can get you into that. And I'm like, okay, fine. Because for years and years and years, I mean, Ira was mad at me that I didn't do a cameo in the sit-down in Vic's the last day of DS9. I was there all day, but I didn't do so I never abused that. I never tried, and there wasn't always the right vibe to do it. But at times I could have asked about that and done it, and done a story or something for it, and it would have been the right way. So I did this, and it was in the finale, and that was all fun. And that day was like the last day of any show. It was bittersweet. It was like DS9's, because Voyager was kind of like, okay, guys, can you all turn those costumes in, and on your way out the door, we got a new show that's going to save the franchise coming in. Can you all just get out the door, please? Thank you. I mean, I felt bad for Bob and Kate and all of them, because they really felt like they were just being pushed out the door, but don't let the screen door hit you on the butt on the way out. But this was celebrated. And TNG was really the same way, because they were just in a hurry to get to the movie. So of all the shows like that, DS9 and Enterprise were the 2 that had this celebratory end day that the producers insisted on. Only this time it wasn't like Manny, it was Rick and Brandon. But Rick especially was feeling very sentimental because it was the end of the era. And he was like going out of his way to do stuff for folks. Now, that's also how you got These Are the Voyages. Which the last thing they wanted to do was create the controversy about it. They were thinking 18 years, not 4 years of Enterprise, and people immediately saw that. And even, I remember Jonathan Marina being there, like, well, yeah, we'll do it and all that, but isn't this getting the way? It's their show. Shouldn't they, be the stars? They felt a little uncomfortable. I mean, they really felt uncomfortable for a lot of it. But the last day there, Majel did her thing and came down with Rod and said thank you to the cast and all that. And all that stuff, and getting to be part of that was amazing. And it was the last day, and Dan Curry will very famously say that it wasn't technically the last day because it did some B unit, and the last shot for Star Trek Berman era was the candle insert from that episode. I think it was, I don't know, something happening with a candle. But yeah, and then watching one by one everybody film their last stuff, and when Scott and Connor did their last scene together. I mean, the last scene was literally Scott and Jolene and Billingsley, the 3 of them, and at the scene before he does his speech, and he's wearing his dress. It's like, wow, they finally get dress uniforms, and it's the last scene of the whole damn show, and it's like going away. No one will ever wear this uniform on a camera again. It was like, I mean, it was just a day of ridiculous ironies. It was bittersweet and sweet. But it was, and that was early May. And then over the next few weeks, I remember seeing him, tear the sets down. And I've got pictures of the sets loaded on flatbed trucks to go away because no one knew what the hell was going to happen with anything yet. Everything was so up in the air. The studio was changing hands, and the Viacom divorce was happening. And it was just like, this is just a tectonic change, and it was.
All right, well,
I'll take a breath.
Take a breath.
Sorry,
take a breath.
guys.
No, don't apologize. Do not apologize for
We
knowing
love the
so much
information.
about
We
this.
love
We want it. We want this. I'm just going to say right here, I've said this before on another podcast. Scott Bakula, would you please come to Salt Lake Comic Con? Please. Please, please, pretty please. Come to Utah. We will shower
Don't
you
send
with
Steve.
love. No, I don't want no Steve Backman.
Make sure they hire Scott.
No Steve Backman. I want me some Scott Bakula. Big time. And many people would agree. Anyway, so to kind of wrap up this whole story with that final episode called These Are the Voyages, do you feel like there is a better way that they could have told this story to, I don't know, keep the fans from so vehemently hating it?
Well, the hate comes. It's like I will often say, yes, I finally was an extra in a show. It was the last show. Don't let me tell you what it was. What was it? The finale of Enterprise. Blah. But it was the good part. It was the good part. It was the Coalition of Planets speech with all the guest extras in there that was cool. Oh, okay. I was in the stupid part where it was so obvious because like when Mike and Gar and Judy and what's that guy, Manny, when all of them were writing shows, it's like it wasn't just like the aliens all had names and their race was named, but it was like, we're using Tellarites and I want real Tellarites. They would take the time to do that, and it was so funny to get that last. It was like, go back to Rick and Brandon time where like grimy alien and polka dot blue skin, like no species names, no names, just random. Pull out some new makeup and stick them on. I mean, like, it was like, yeah, and they got, Jeff and Shran were in that last time, and that was nice. But it just read like, oh, look, it's 3 aliens who we don't know where they're coming from, and we have no idea, what their deal is. And they don't even have names, so they will forever be, these poor guest actors will never be able to know what their name was until somebody working on a collectible card game or something gives them a name, and they go, oh, my name was so-and-so on the card.
It's Daryl and his other brother, Daryl.
It
Always
was
Daryl's.
not Larry. It was just Daryl and his other brother. Daryl.
Yeah.
I have a real brother Daryl, by the way.
I had a real Uncle Daryl.
But my other brother's name was Gary, not Daryl. Yeah. Saying that I was, having to be that it was the finale, but parts of that show were a lot of fun and were good, and him doing the speech and the scene with. He and Jolene. I mean, Killing Trip was ridiculous. And,
Thank you.
And they retconned it in the books. It was just like, what? Now is the fine time. By then you were starting to have the meme about no one ever dies. And Enterprise. Now you guys know this. Enterprise. It became a thing that never had a red shirt or anyone that died. They were going to have what's his name, the Russian in the cave, die on the second episode, and they liked him so much, they were like, no, let's keep him around. Let's not kill him. And then after that, it just became this bigger and bigger elephant. The years would go by, and somebody would do a draft story where somebody died, and they're like, do we really want to have our first person die, be that guy in that situation? And then we're like, nah. And then it became, but the more they did that, it just became a thing. And so finally the Zinda year, it was kind of like, hey, time to kill people, and they finally did. But
Episode 2.
It's the Zinda year. That's called, you can tell it's so revved up. People are dying. I mean,
Nobody's safe.
Here come the ratings. People are dying, but didn't happen.
I feel almost like, this is only a personal opinion, I feel almost like somebody made sure that we never actually saw Trip's body so that we could have that plausible deniability and resurrect him at another time, because that was just so... I don't know anyone who liked that.
He's going to show up in the Spore Drive with Kelber.
There you go. Connor
That was
Trinneer's great. I love that guy. Get him on Discovery. Let's do it.
Trip's spore pod remains have been floating through the galaxy for 100 years, and until they land on Tilly's shoulder.
I am on board.
Best one I've heard. No, so Manny would talk about the finale, and he was like, I got to play. So he didn't have his 20. Mm-hmm. He wound up with 19.
Right.
But he'll say, I got to fix the show, quote unquote, and give people what they thought they were going to get from day one. It's just the irony that, the shows everybody enjoyed, the episodes that people enjoyed the most are the ones that, got the show canceled, which it didn't. The writing was on the, it was in the mix way before that.
Yeah,
but he will always say that to him, the shots of the final shots of was it Demons and Terra Prime or Terra Prime and Demons?
It's Demons and Terra.
Is part
Yeah.
2.
Demons
Yeah.
and Terra Prime. Terra Prime's part 2.
Yeah, that the final shot of them on the stairwell, which that's all the Paramount Theater lobby, by the way, if you know that. Them on the stairs as they pan over everybody, and they have the group shot of the crew. It's like that's their hero final shot moment. He says, to me, the real finale of Enterprise is really Terra Prime.
A lot of people feel
because
that
you
way.
see them, they've accomplished that. Yeah, I mean, people. Yeah, it's you can't help it when especially when you're watching in order. But the fact that they didn't get to the Federation, but they got the Coalition of Planets, and we've got, it started. You know what? In the Babel arc, and I forget which show it is. Maybe it's United. But that moment when the Vulcan, the Human, the Tellarite, and the Andorian are all shaking hands. It's like you say what you will about ratings. It's like that was just such a wet your eye Star Trek moment. Yeah. It's right up there with First Contact and the Vulcan coming out the first time. That's what they were aiming for, and that's totally what delivered. And the Tellarites finally got ships.
I prefer when the Vulcan came out in in Amir Darkly. And every First Contact day, I always I post that image and I say, raid their ship, take whatever you can. Happy First Contact Day.
I know. I've seen you post that. Yeah.
Yep. I remember that.
Well, who knows? There's times when I feel like we're in in that alternate universe right now. So I'm going to be real curious to see what happens in not 50 years now. What are we down to? 46 years? Yeah.
Larry, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time. We know you're so busy, and you got your own podcast. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and tell everybody about the Trek Files with an F. Trek Files with an F.
Yes. Oh, is that because... See, I started doing that, and I wonder if that's going to become my thing. I was trying to find a catchphrase. Yeah. Trekophiles with an F. Yeah, so the Trek Files is on Roddenberry's network, but John Champion's kind of the director for that. We work together on it and get the guests, but it's on the Trek FM feed, like Mission Log is. So if you're ready to do the deep dive, if you're of a Trekland mindset, we pull pieces of paper out of Gene's, and they're literally pieces of paper out of Gene's files. Mostly things that have not gone to the UCLA archives, big and little, everything from letters from fans to huge memos and story drafts. All from he died in 91. So we have the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. We have original series through their fallow times, through, get a movie already, to the movie era, and I'm not running things days, and Harv is to 6, and then the comeback for Next Generation. And the first few years of Next Generation. And so that's all a lot of rich stuff to mine, and doing it in 15 minutes, which I know after this hour, once again, people are amazed. But John holds me to it, even if he's not my guest. And having Dorothy Fontana in to talk about it, and
so great.
And Doug Drexler's going to be a guest coming up, and we've just started to tap the well. Dave Rossi.
Yeah, he's been on.
I tried for Dave Rossi, but I couldn't get him, so I had to settle.
He was too busy on our show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going down the list. I went for Dave Rossi, and then I went for Steve Backman, and then I finally had to settle for Dave. But
Larry, if you can find it, we don't want to talk about it now, but if you can find it, I have a special request for the Trek Files. I'd love to see if you could dig something up on Silicon of Atar. Because if I know, I think Roddenberry was not a fan of that episode and what happened with that episode and how it ended up. So if you could dig something up on that, I'd love to hear something.
Okay, that was early fourth season.
Early
right?
fifth, right? That would be right
Fifth?
before he died.
Well, see, he was out of it by then, so he probably didn't have any active. Yeah, he'd been having his mini strokes since the spring and summer, so he probably didn't actively. Okay. But we'll see. There's some other things like that I want to see if we can find a paper on. And I just want to mention real quick, guys, the Trek Files is awesome, but Portal 47, I'm about to have a public open house where if you come over to LarryNemecek.com, do a click and just sign on and get a virtual seat. I'm going to have Mike Westmore be my open house guest May 16th, which is a Wednesday night from 7 to 8
That's 12 days
Pacific.
from when this episode airs. Yeah.
Okay, good. So people, and it's unlimited, it's virtual. So as you hear this, just come over to LarryNemecek.com. It's right there at the front of the top of the homepage, and click in and reserve your seat and get the info about how to get on. And you can even pre-submit questions ahead of time. Awesome. So I'm very excited about that.
Excellent, right on. And where can people follow you on social media?
At Larry Nemecek on Twitter and YouTube, and then Larry Nemecek's Trekland on Facebook and Instagram.
Excellent, right on.
And everything about Trek Files is on the Facebook at the Trek Files. You can subscribe at Roddenberry Podcasts or podcast.roddenberry.com or the Trek FM master feed. Otherwise, you can pick them off every week with the document. The other thing about that is the document is there every week, so you can read along with us.
Right on. Well, talking about Steve Backman is not the only thing we're discussing here on the network this week. So please take a listen to this clip and see what else you may have missed elsewhere on Track FM.
Previously on Trek.fm, Warp 5.
I guess I'm going to be the one dissenter because I saw major differences. Maybe not in the way it was shot, but in the storylines. And I just thought, yeah, it's Klingon court, and that's pretty much where the similarities ended for me.
The 602 Club.
And I really love, before they go to detention, their principal, Bentley, saying, you get one life, and you get to decide how you're going to spend it. And on top of that, Bravestone says to Finbar, he says, it's a lot easier to be brave when you've got lives to spare. It's a lot harder when you only have one life. And Finbar's like, you've only ever had one life. Mm-hmm.
The Orb.
I felt like they found a reason for why Sisko would say, okay, I'll stay. Otherwise, he immediately, at the beginning, was like, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to get involved. Send me back to my universe. This is not my place.
Earl Grey.
Wesley and Petru pass by Worf's quarters where they hear screams coming from within. They find Worf is being beaten by Geordi, Tasha, and Data. There's more. Petru moves in to help, but Wesley stops him. He explains that this moment of humiliation is one celebrated by Klingons.
Okay.
So, and the script goes on to explain that Worf tearfully thanks Geordi, Tasha, and Data because being humiliated by friends makes it, quote, the finest humiliation he'd ever experienced.
Okay, I almost believe that, except the part that says Worf in tears.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out all these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You'll find us wherever you get your podcast. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app, and get the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And please leave us a star rating and written review. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 files from our website or grab the RSS link.
My darling boomers, we would love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are so many ways you can do that. The best place, of course, to join in the larger conversation is the Babel Conference. That's our listeners group on Facebook. Just go to the search field and type Babel, B-A-B-E-L, on Facebook, and it should be like one of the first one or two results. And if you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and choose Warp 5. That will come directly to us. And you can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. So, Patrick, when you're not sniggering at mistakenly calling Scott Bakula Steve Backman, where can people find you?
Well, when I'm not messing up Scott Bakula as his twin sister, you can find me hanging out in the Babel Conference from time to time. I pop in there. I don't always respond to things that I see, but I do read a lot of it. And if you ask me a direct question, I will probably answer you. You can also find me on Twitter at MagicDrop5. That's one word. The 5 is a number. And that's about it. Pay attention to my feeds, and you may see I'll be popping up somewhere new very shortly.
Ooh, juicy danglers.
Yes. And, Brendan, when you're not hiding from us with your kids, never mind. So, Brandi, when you're not trying to figure out how to rewrite the last episode so people don't vehemently hate it, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Brandywine12, Brandy with an I, 12 is the number. You can find me lurking in the Babel Conference from time to time, although my time is so limited these days right now. And also, I do a podcast with my sweet husband Dave called the Dark Corner Podcast, which you can find on strangeanddeadly.com, or you can pick up anywhere that podcasts are pervade. And we talk about whatever we want, but mostly pop culture from sort of a darker point of view. And there is swearing, so don't let kids listen. And so that's where you can find me. And if all of you or any of you would like to help us keep all of our shows coming to you each and every week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/trekfm. That is patreon.com/trekfm. Get those consonants in there to get all the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more. And it's all available through our special patrons website, Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of money to produce, host, and distribute these shows each month, and we really appreciate any support you can give us. We hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/trekfm.
At this time, we'd like to thank our producers, Norman C. Lau, Floyd Dorsey, Mike Morrison, Tim Cooper, Justin Oster, Mark Flesher, and Joe Saltzman. Thank you for supporting Warp 5 and Trek FM Network. Well, that's all we have for you this week, so keep calm and boom on.
I am not fit to run loose. Yeah, I hope they didn't get attacked by Romulans.
I don't think so. I hope not.
If we were anywhere near the Romulan Star Empire, they're screwed. I'm just kidding.